This morning we're going to be looking at the idea of a false sense of immunity. False sense, and what does that even mean? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. But first, let's go to Acts chapter 13:41. As was just read, "Behold, you despisers, marvel and perish." This is from Habakkuk 1 and verse 5, and it's from God. It is a prophet speaking to those who would refuse His words. Refuse His words. "Behold, you despisers, marvel and perish, for I work a work in your days, a work which you will by no means believe, though one were to declare it to you." This is God prophesying about those who would not receive His words, not receive the words of the Christ, not receive the words of the gospel, not receive their own salvation. They would refuse it. And He calls them despisers. And that the fact that marvel and perish, that this is precisely what you are going to do. And this is one of those points where God tells people, this is what you're going to do, and then they prove Him right. That's precisely what they do. Now, let's go in just a little bit more of an idea of this false sense of immunity. What does that mean? It is thinking that I am safe from judgment. And we just justify it. We do whatever we need to do to come to that idea. I am safe from judgment. I am the exception. I am the special case. Whatever that happens to be, however we think that may be, that you have those who He calls despisers, that they would have just disregarded the words of God as being invalid, as being nothing. But we're going to look at this, and we start off in Psalm 94, beginning in verse 5, "They break in pieces your people, O Lord, and afflict your heritage." Now, He is talking about Israel doing this. Israel against the righteous. The wicked in Israel against the righteous in Israel. "They slay the widow and the stranger, and murder the fatherless." And note what He says next. "Yet they say, the Lord does not see, nor does God, the God of Jacob, understand." Here is this idea that I will not be held in judgment, that for some reason, and with this, the reason would be here, God doesn't see. I can do whatever I want to do. The Lord doesn't see. The God of Jacob has no understanding whatsoever. That somehow He created all things and somehow He's not capable of keeping up with all things. We start off with the brazen approach. And that's basically saying, what sin? What sin could I possibly have done? What sin have I ever done? Because the way I see it, I have done nothing. And the brazen approach would be one of where it is someone dead set on doing wrong and proud of what they're doing. Completely proud of it all. It is saying, what I do is not serious. Besides all this, what is sin to me? That's the brazen approach. What is sin to me? I don't care about my reputation. I don't care what people think about me. I don't care what God thinks about me. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I have met the occasional person, not very often, but I have met the occasional person that knew very well they were going to hell. They knew it. But it didn't seem to bother them. It didn't seem to bother them. That they anticipated, yeah, I will be going to hell, but I'm enjoying what I've got now. Well, you've only got it for a little bit, and it is gone. It is gone. It is only for a season, and it's gone. What is sin to me? Proverbs 30 and verse 20. "This is the way of the adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wickedness." I've done nothing. I've done no wickedness whatsoever. And she can't quite comprehend that someone would think that it is wicked. But her judge does. The judge of all the earth certainly believes that to be the case. In Jeremiah 6:15, "Were they ashamed when they had committed abominations?" And the answer is no. They weren't ashamed at all. They were brazen about it. They were proud about it. And that word pride All right, there really is not a good sense to that word, but now it's being made into something even worse, actually. But that word pride is being used in this, that as it is being done today. Were they ashamed when they committed abominations? No, they're not ashamed of it. They're quite proud of it and double down on it and then try to enforce it on others and try to make that, try to turn everything upside down, which we're going to get into a minute. Try to turn everything upside down. That not only is what I do, not only is it not an abomination, it's good. And if you don't accept it, then you are the abomination. All right, that's turning it upside down, but we'll get to that in just a second. No, they were not at all ashamed, nor did they know how to blush. Nothing could make them ashamed of what they've done. Nothing could do it. That there seemed to be this whatever action that they were proud of it. Whatever action it was, they were okay with it. They didn't know how to blush. Therefore, they shall fall among those who fall. At the time I punish them, they shall be cast down, says the Lord. Now we come to the upside down approach. That is saying sin is good. That's the upside down approach. And we start with Isaiah 5 and verse 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Or what's happened here? That is switching everything upside down. That it's not evil, that's good. And what you thought was good, oh, that's evil. That's evil. Well, this whole idea is satanic, of switching everything around. Years ago, I read a book, and I actually remember the title of this book. It's The New Absolutes, and it was talking about how have been taught for decades that there is no such thing as absolute truth. There is no such thing as truth. So you can believe whatever you want, do whatever you want. And what they're saying is what they'd have to be saying is there's no such thing as reality. If there's no absolute truth, then reality cannot exist. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to say there are no absolute truths, that something is absolutely true and the rest would have to be absolutely false, or to say that something is absolutely right and doing the opposite would be absolutely wrong. That's not, the goal is not to change it to where nothing is absolute, but the goal is to switch it. What would be absolutely true, we diminish that by saying there is no truth, and then come in, here's the new truth. All right, that truth is out. Here's the new truth. Well, I thought you said there's no absolute truth. Well, here is absolute truth. And it's switching it out. It's a change in it. And it goes from where good, nah, sin, nah, there's no such thing. And then switching it over, yeah, what was sinful yesterday is good today. And we have a culture that is on a decline. It's been on one for a long, long time, but we are in a free fall today. In a complete free fall. Uncontrolled free fall. And what was considered evil just a few years ago, things that no one would have uttered publicly, now it's okay. Matter of fact, that's what everyone should have been saying throughout the history of mankind. Everyone should have been saying that. It's all been turned upside down. Who put darkness for light and light for darkness? Who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter? So what you think is light is actually darkness, and what you thought was darkness, well, that's actually light. And what you think is sweet, now that's bitter, and what's bitter is actually sweet. You've got it all wrong. You've got the entire thing wrong. And here is this turning the world and all reality and everything on its head. Well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. This is the upside down approach, Joshua 24:15. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord. So we start off with that one. If it seems evil to serve the Lord, if Jehovah is evil, then okay, here are your options. But here is taking someone who is good, holy, completely holy. From eternity to eternity, holy and perfect. taking him, and now you make him evil. And Joshua gives this option. If you think it's evil to serve Jehovah, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. Just go ahead and make your choice. Make your choice and live with that choice. But make that choice. And then he gives them the option that it could be the gods that were your fathers worship on the other side of the river, or it could be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve Jehovah. We will serve the Lord. He is not evil to us as far as we're concerned. He is entirely good. As far as we're concerned, He is precisely what He is. Holy, holy, holy. And worth everything we have. Completely. Now, we come to 1 Kings 18:17. This is Ahab seeing Elijah. He's been looking for Elijah. He's been out trying to hunt. Well, he's been hunting for him to kill him. That's what he's been doing. Then it happened when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said to him, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" Is that what Elijah is? A troubler of Israel? Is that what he is? Now Elijah says, you and your family are the troubler of Israel. Now you're the ones who are the actual troublers in all this, and that he has turned everything upside down. Just as we saw in this one, Ahab and Jezebel and those with them would have said, yes, it is evil to serve Jehovah God. It is evil to serve Jehovah God. Therefore, they serve all these others. You have the 450 prophets of Baal. They were the ones supporting them. They were the ones that ate at the king's table. They are the ones that were what Ahab and Jezebel wanted. And then the prophet of God, bringing the word of God, now becomes the troubler of Israel. How is that? He has the words to save and to help Israel. Whereas those false prophets, there's nothing good that's going to... They're just lying spirits. They're just these lying prophets. They can help no one. A lie never benefits anyone. There's never a benefit to it. And a lie is something that is going to show itself to be a nothing. That's why the truth always wins and lies always fail. It's the difference between reality and fiction. Reality stands on its own. Fiction it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at all. Now, we come to Mark chapter 3 and verse 22. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, "He has Beelzebub, and by the ruler of demons he casts out demons." Who are they saying that about? About Jesus. So what you've done is you've said now that the Messiah, the Christ, is not who He is. He's not from God. He's from Satan. You've turned someone who is the one to save mankind now to the adversary of mankind. The one who is good and has been doing good. He's even been casting out demons. He has been healing the blind, healing the sick. He's even raised the dead. And now you're saying He's doing that because He has Beelzebub, and by the ruler of the demons He casts out demons. This is turning everything upside down. But this is what Satan's been doing from the beginning. And we've talked about this before. In Genesis chapter 3, when the serpent says, "You shall not surely die," what he's saying is an enormous lie that God is lying to you, therefore God is wicked. He just took God, who is their creator, Adam and Eve's, who is good, and just turned everything upside down. No, He's actually evil, and He's out to fool you. And and he is not who you think he is. He has lied to you. You make the conclusion. All right, then, and all Satan, all the serpent had to do is he just had to say, you shall not surely die. That's all he had to say. And the rest is logically implied. The rest is logically implied. That there's something wrong with God. If he's lied to me, there's something wrong with God. That's turning everything upside down. Well, the scribes who came out of Jerusalem, they're saying the same thing. That the Son of God is actually working for Satan. That's horrible news. If that's true, that's horrible news. But what have they done? They have turned everything upside down and backwards. What is good and what is holy and what is righteous and the Son of God now becomes wicked and an adversary of men and just hatred and a worker of Satan. Okay, that's doing a lot. That's doing a lot. And we go to John 18 verse 14. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Okay, now this is making, you realize what this is saying, that it instead of killing the Christ is wicked, that killing the Christ is expedient. That's making it good. That murder is expedient. And so there is some kind of, while it may be a wicked thing to do, it's a necessary evil. It's necessary that we do these things, but that one man should die for the people. All right, never mind, it's murder. This is expedient. So it's taking something that is evil, killing the Christ, and now making expedient to where it's not murder anymore. You're saving the people because of this. Well, while they meant it as murder and they meant it as wicked, and it was wickedness on their part, what he is saying is true. That one does die for the people. And he's not dying for just Israel to save Israel. He's dying for the entire world. And here's a place where we can see what men intended and Satan intended to be the worst of wicked deeds. Christ has made into the greatest victory and the greatest show of love, all in the workings of God. Now, we go to our next one. It's the self-righteous approach. This would be like the salesman of the year kind of approach. I once met a fellow, and he was of the brazen sort, I have to say. But he worked for some car dealership, and evidently he was by far the best salesman they had. I never met him before. Okay, that's fine. But he went on to tell me that he could do pretty much anything that he wanted to do in that office. And they weren't about to fire him because he made them more money than anybody else. All right, so he's at salesman of the year, maybe salesman of the century approach, that God allows me to sin. He'll allow me to do anything because of the things I do for Him. He'll allow me to do anything. In this is I do these great things. He needs me. What is He without me? And I tell you what, there are some televangelists that it seems like that's the way they are. That's the way they would, evidently, because they're bringing in people by the thousands, preaching false doctrine, by the way, but bringing in people by the thousands and being broadcast to even many, many more, millions, I suppose, and living a life that is shockingly sinful. And somehow it's okay. Somehow this is okay. Well, it's just false prophets doing what false prophets do. That's all it is. False teachers doing what false teachers do. And it's not that God doesn't need them. He needs them to stop what they're doing. He needs them to accept Him and now start preaching Him, which is going to be a different message. Start preaching the message of the gospel. That's what they need to be doing. Now, we go to Isaiah 5 and 21. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. They believe themselves to be wise. They believe it. You cannot convince them they're not. They're prudent in their own sight, and you cannot convince them that they're not. They just completely convinced that they are the righteous upon the earth, and there's not anything you can do to convince them otherwise. There is a syndrome that's the Dunning-Kruger effect is what it's known as in psychology. And it's also known as Mount Stupid. And it's where someone thoroughly believes they are an expert at something or expert at everything. And they're not. And you can't convince them that you are an utter failure in this. That you can't just suddenly be an expert in everything, or you can't suddenly be a know-all in all of these things. And it's just the opposite. It's the opposite. They are a danger to everyone. And they know nothing about what they think they know everything about. They know nothing. And it's got to be just the height of arrogance, I guess, or self-deception, I guess. But here is this idea, wise in their own eyes, prudent in their own sight. And this would mean that no one is more wise, no one is more prudent, no one is more righteous than they are. And we go to the book of Judges and how the book of Judges ends. The book of Judges ends with a commentary on that age, that there was no king in those days, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. All right, now as a child, in reading that, I thought, and not really knowing the book of Judges very well at all, I thought, well, that's kind of nice. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Well, that's nice that they did that, without realizing what it really meant. What it really meant is they thought they were doing right, but they weren't. And there are things in the book of Judges, and there are things in the Bible also, that is mentioned matter-of-factly, but there isn't a comment at the end of each one of those actions that says, but this was disapproved of God. You should already know this was disapproved of God. And that gets some people. I've had people say that God approved this or God approved that. And I said, well, how did you come up with that conclusion? And they'll show me a chapter. And I said, you should know that's evil, and it does not say God approved it. Matter of fact, I can show you where God doesn't approve of that kind of action. Does He have to say after every lie, and that was a lie, or after every murder, and that was wicked, or after every whatever it is, and that was wicked? Does He have to say that? Or can He just rely on your sense of intelligence that you can get it? And your sense of learning morality that you can get it? Well, you can get it. Now, wise in their own eyes? They're not wise according to God. Jeremiah 7:4, do not trust in these lying words saying the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are these. Now, what does that mean? We just need to put this in perspective. Jeremiah is in a day, it was a difficult day. His life on this earth was difficult. During before and during the Babylonian captivity, and trying to minister, preach to, prophesy to the people of Jerusalem, and that would be the king on down, that this is the will of God, that these things are happening. The Babylonians are here by way of punishment of God. Go ahead and let this happen. Do you want to make this easier on yourself? Do not oppose it. Let them in. Don't oppose it. And of course, what he says would have been seen as subversive and traitorous. But it's not. It's the Word of God. And the king especially, hated him for it, and hated what he was writing for it. And they had these lying words All right? The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are these. What does that mean? We've got the temple of the Lord. And they did. Yeah, the temple was right there. The temple of Jehovah was right there. The one that Solomon had built. It's still there. It's there. And they thought mistakenly that because the temple is there, that God wasn't about to let any Gentile, any foreigner come in and take over the city, because He's got to protect that temple. Well, here is the problem. And this is something that we find out especially in the book of Ezekiel, is that that temple had become a place, it had become this pantheon. It had become this place of worshiping. Well, Jehovah, it does belong to Him, but they have these other things in there that they worship as well. And other images that are there that they worship as well. He left the temple of the Lord. Well, if you're going to be corrupt about it, and you're going to, He's not going to be shared with anything. It doesn't belong to Him anymore. It doesn't belong to Him anymore. And having the temple there in the city will not protect you. And you should have learned this already by the book of Judges with Hophni and Phinehas, when someone came up with the brilliant idea of taking the Ark of the Covenant into the battle against the Philistines. All right? It didn't turn out well. Somehow God is going to protect the Ark of the Covenant, therefore we take it into the battle and we're going to win. God doesn't work like that. He's not going to be some kind of pet that you can have on a chain. He's not like that at all. And the ark is taken away by the Philistines, and the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians. All right? Don't think somehow that you're going to be able to play games with God. Matthew 7:22, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? They're giving a resume. This is what we have done. They're giving this resume, but there's something else about them that He shows. And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Were they able, in fact, in their life, did they prophesy in His name, cast out demons in His name, do mighty works in His, or wonders in His name? Yeah, I think they probably did. But as far as their life was concerned, they never were obedient to God. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. You must do the will of His Father. That's what makes someone lawless, that they don't do the will. They thought themselves righteous. They thought themselves a shoo-in simply because they had done these things while He was on the earth, or there in the first century. They were able to do it. Now, we have this, Jesus giving these examples of two men. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. Okay, one who's highly regarded as a religious man, the other who would have been seen as just the worst of sinners, just the worst sort. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I'm not like this. Here's my resume. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. And the tax collector, standing afar off, would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Exalted by God. Someone who's going to exalt themselves, someone who's going to just think that they are it, think that they know everything, think that they are holy, think that they do not need God. And there's a lot of people that are like that. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people that are like that. Now, I made mention of knowing some in my life, and as I said, few who are very well assured they're going to hell, and somehow they're okay with that. But I also know more of this category, more in this category, who somehow they don't think they need a Savior, that they're okay. They're not a horrible person. And they can always look at somebody else who's worse. All right, I may have these problems in my life, but I'm not like him. But what about him? He can say, well, I have these problems in my life, but I'm not like this other guy. He's the worst. And what about him? He can always point to somebody else. He said, well, I may do these, but at least I'm not a murderer. And the guy who's a murderer may say, well, I may have killed somebody, but I'm justified in it. At least I'm not like this serial killer. And then the serial killer, there's no end to it, really. There's no end to it. He can find someone, at least, at least I don't tell lies. I mean, he can come up with something into thinking that God cannot be displeased with me because I do something right. Now, we go to the next point. Here is a different approach, and that is for the ignorant and the unconvinced. And people can pretend to be unconvinced. Show them the evidence upon the evidence upon the evidence upon the evidence, and it's not enough. And I usually use this illustration. It's from a debate. It was by Warren, who believed in God, and Antony Flew, who was an atheist. And Warren asked Antony Flew, it was on paper, so he was to write his answer down. What would you want as proof that there is a God? What proof is enough for you to where you would say, yes, there must be a God? What's the proof? And Antony Flew left the page blank. He wasn't about to say what the proof would be, because in honesty, he would never accept anything. Now, eventually, Antony Flew, later in his life, did become a theist, but that's it. He did believe that there had to be a God. But that's many years later. But on that debate, which was like in 1973, I think that it was then. Anyway, at that debate, he refused to answer that question. He wasn't going to answer that question for fear that somehow Warren would pull something out. He's not about to have to admit to his fellow atheists that there is something that perhaps is out there that would prove there is a God, because the idea is to deny God. It's never to allow any space for proofs. It's never to allow that. So someone can remain unconvinced and you just can't get through. They're going to act unconvinced. But God allows me to do these things that He forbids others from doing simply because I don't know anything about it, or simply because I'm not convinced that I'm supposed to be doing it. Okay, I know nothing about it and I haven't come to a proper conclusion. Luke 12, beginning of verse 47. And that servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself or do according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. This is Jesus saying this, and this is in a parable. This is a conclusion to a parable. The servant who knew to do his master's will doesn't do it. There's going to be a punishment for that. And it's going to be rather strict. It's going to be a strict punishment. Next one is strict too. But punishment in this case is severe. In both cases, it's severe. But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. All right, you don't want stripes, whether it's the many or the few. You don't want either one of those, because it is severe and it does mean separation from God. It does mean hell. In both of these cases, it does mean hell. That ignorance cannot and will not save you. And we can look at various people throughout the Bible of where we can show that to be the case. God says what He means, and He's going to do what He said. He's going to do it. Now, King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you believe. Paul is saying this to King Agrippa. Paul is a prisoner, and you have Felix and Festus. They are governors, Roman governors, and each of them go and visit Paul. And Paul, they speak about the case that's against him, which they can't quite understand. And he teaches them the gospel. And now you have King Agrippa and his wife Bernice. They have come, and he explains to them precisely as he has been doing for years. Basically, what he was doing in the first missionary journey and the second missionary journey, he's now doing for King Agrippa in teaching him the basics. Here is what Moses and the prophets said. This is what occurred in the life of Jesus of Nazareth. And this is the kingdom that was established exactly as Daniel said. On time, exactly as described. So, I know you do believe. Then Agrippa said to Paul, you almost persuade me to become a Christian. So in saying that, okay, I'm not convinced enough, therefore I can ignore it. You almost have done it, but not quite. Now you've fallen short in all this. So you can just ignore this. You can just turn your back on a mountain range of evidence. Just put your eyes down and ignore what is directly in front of you. And just say, I'm not convinced there's a mountain range in front of me. Well, okay. But he just definitely went from that point of being one who did not know to do his master's will, which actually I think he was prior to this, to one that now knows to do his master's will. He's just not going to do it. He's not going to do it at all. We come to this, and it's the loophole approach. And in God's words, in His laws, in His will, there is no legal loophole that you can create. It doesn't happen. And there is no human being that can somehow, through their influence with God, is going to allow you to do something that God doesn't allow anybody else to do. No one has that power. No one has it whatsoever. God's laws do not contain loopholes. God can, and the idea is He can't hold me accountable for my actions because I have found a way around His laws, that His laws do have some flaws to them, that I can do it my way, and His laws don't really cover me at all. This is cleverly finding an exception to God's rules. Cleverly finding exceptions here. Mark 7, beginning of verse 10, Jesus says this, and Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and he who curses father and mother, let him be put to death. That's the law of Moses. Moses did write that. And that was a law. How do you get around that? Well, evidently they had discovered a way around it, but they're just fooling themselves. There is no way around that. But you say, if a man says to his father and mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is korban. And now we have a parenthetical statement to explain what korban is. It's a gift to God. All right, whatever benefit you would have gained from me, why, that's a gift to God. I've given that to God. So I'm not going to take care of you. I'm not going to honor you. That is this wondrous gift to God. You should be proud of me for this. That's a wonderful gift to God. And you no longer let him do anything for his father or his mother. All right? It's a gift to God. You can ignore them when they need you the most. You can ignore them after they have reared you and fed you and educated you and all that clothed you and brought you through every situation and every problem through your childhood. They brought you up, and yet it means nothing to you. And here, the lawyers and the others, Pharisees and the rulers, that they're going to allow that to take place. You don't have to do anything for your father or mother now. They're just a burden. They're a big inconvenience. It's korban. Give that to God. Just give it to God, and that is it. Making the Word of God of no effect through your tradition, which you have handed down, and many such things you do. That's finding this loophole. Just give it to God. Well, where does it say anywhere in Scripture where that's okay? That here is something you owe someone, in this case your parents, but you don't have to do it if you just say it's a gift to God. You don't have to do it at all. Nowhere. This is just made up. This is just stuff that someone cleverly put together, but you're not going to out-clever God, and you're not going to make His laws of no effect. You don't have, you may not be obeying any of them, but that doesn't mean they're worthless, and that doesn't mean there won't be a judgment on your actions. There will be a judgment on your actions. Beware, therefore, lest what has been spoken in the prophets also come upon you. This is going back to Paul and his sermon in Acts chapter 13. Behold, you despisers, marvel and perish, for I work a work in your days, a work which you will by no means believe, though one were to declare it to you. Thoroughly, I believe that there are people living today who will see that and who will hear the words of Christ, hear the words that they're supposed to do, and they will behave precisely as predicted by Habakkuk. Precisely as God said they would. The despisers of this generation will do exactly as the despisers of the last, and the despisers going back thousands of years. They're going to be doing the same thing. Just go ahead. Marvel and perish. And there is no telling how many people died on this earth, through history, died on this earth, lifted their eyes up in torments on the other side to suddenly realize what I was told was from God, and here I am. What I was told through all those years that I ignored it was absolutely true. God told me the truth, but I just despised it. God told me what to do, I disregarded it. God told me what to do in all of this, and here I am in torments. And not a thing you can do at that point. Not a thing. It is done. It's done by that point. And to this day, you have despisers who will look at that and they're happy to be despisers. All right, so that's what I do. Well, continue in that, and you too, continue in that. You too will lift up your eyes in torments and come to the same conclusion. There's no telling how many atheists have lifted their eyes in torments and realized, yeah, there is a God. How many denied Christ to realize in torments, yes, I actually was to follow Christ. I have played the fool. Well, there's no point in that. There's no advantage in that. There's nothing that this world can give you, or that Satan can give you, or that wealth or anything can give you that is of any worth whatsoever to replace Christ. There is nothing. Because He brings salvation. He brings everything that we need and want. And he brings eternal life. The words go out to everyone. Everyone can respond to the call. And here's the news. Everyone will respond to the call. Everyone will respond. They'll either respond positively or negatively. One or the other. Growing closer to God, a step closer, 2 steps closer, that's positive. Now go all the way. Or others taking a step away or a couple of steps away. Getting further away, and that's no good. But Jesus was under no illusion that somehow his words would be accepted by the majority of the world. He knew that wasn't going to happen because he's the Son of God. He knows how everyone's going to react to it. He knows there will be some who want it, but most will not. And it is to their detriment. And God trying once again to help us. He's done his part. Now, let's do our part. Let's make the adjustments. Let's do what is right. And we ask this morning, if you need to respond to the gospel, if you need the prayers of the congregation, if we can help you in any way, that you come as we stand and sing.